A new report from the Higher Education Policy Institute has today suggested universities with a zero-tolerance approach to drugs are doing more harm than good. Now, this is because these policies make students fearful that if they come forward for help, they'll be punished. And the report argues that a more tolerant, health-focused approach to drug taking could combat, on campus, could help combat the problem more effectively, as it would give more priority to preventing harm by drug use, as opposed to preventing drug use altogether. Well, Lehane is an advisor at harm reduction organisation Drugs and Me, and a regular commentator. Welcome to the programme. Is this unusual for the higher for HEPI? It's a respected think tank to come out with this sort of report.
I think it's quite unusual, but all credit to them. I think that the sort of conversation is showing now that the current approach to drugs is not working. That goes for poorer communities, older people, but also for students too. 16% of people polled in this report said that they were having drug issues but refused to call an ambulance. So there are clear consequences to the zero-tolerance approach at universities and the impact that is having on students. First and foremost, universities should be there to protect students, to protect their well-being, and currently the zero-tolerance approach is not doing that. Students are losing their lives, losing their livelihoods, and it's time we got a grip on this crisis. So all credit to HEPI for coming out and rubbishing the zero-tolerance approach, which we know doesn't work.
It's interesting because I was reading recently about what happened in the Second World War, not with regard to drugs, but with regard to venereal disease. Yes. And those troops that practiced abstinence, or preached abstinence, I should say, had a much higher incidence of venereal disease than those that were handed out protection and contraception. And it's almost like we learnt this lesson 70 years ago when it comes to harm reduction in the field of the armed forces. But we're not taking a harm reduction approach, not elimination, but reduction approach. And that's having terrible consequences when it comes to drug policy.
That's absolutely correct. So I'd always advocate for a model rooted in health and not criminalisation. There are some really easy steps that could be taken to protect students. In Bristol University, for example, they've teamed up with the local drug treatment agency to provide drug checking kits, drug testing kits, providing sort of education and advice to students. Let's not beat around the bush. Students are going to take drugs whether they're illegal or not. The ages between 18 and 22 are quite difficult times, growing up. So I think we need to protect these students. A lot of these people will be taking drugs for the very first time. How are they to know, for example, an ecstasy pill might have 4 doses, 4 times the regular dose, and if they take that in one go or take 2, they might pass away, and their friends won't call an ambulance because of the criminalisation. They don't want to be thrown out of university. They don't want to end up in prison. So yeah, we need a different approach, not just in universities, but beyond that. Yes.
Well, I suppose when you're referring to those kind of drugs where it's completely unregulated in a black market, you don't know the quantity of things, that's where some of the real danger of these things takes place. Do you think as a society we're starting to recognise this? Is there any chance of broader policy change in the near future?
Well, I hope so. The government recently released a drug strategy. Now, when they released it, there was the sort of classic tough on crime, Boris Johnson dressing up as a police officer. But actually, if you scratch away at the surface a little bit, the policies were quite good. We are moving towards decriminalisation. Drug checking, as in where you can go and test your substances, is happening. Police and crime commissioners are very behind the move. So we are moving in the correct direction. We're just stuck in a little bit of political difficulty whereby Labour and the Tories want to seem tough on crime, and unfortunately, people who use drugs are the first victims of that. Now, Labour have been just as guilty as the Conservatives at playing this kind of card and, championing a sort of tired drum of zero tolerance and criminalisation, which is a proven failure.
Well, that is fascinating. That the headline of the policy can sometimes be different from the detail of the policy underneath. It suggests to me that the people in power know what they would like to do in an ideal world.
Yes.
But given perhaps the media, perhaps I'm at fault here, perhaps the tabloid media is at fault as well. Given that, they prefer to dress it up in a different way. I'm afraid we've run to the end of the programme here. But for now, Lehane, thank you for joining us here on The Briefing.